Hey y'all, I'm Dr. Lucretia Cook, but you can call me Dr. Lala. Welcome back to another episode of the Revolve Podcast, where grief and loss are a journey, not a final destination. So it is still the month of October. And as you guys know, October is near and dear to my heart. We wear pink and blue for Infant and Child Loss Awareness Month. And so that is still what we're talking about this month. And as I've been saying through previous episodes, I know this is a heavy topic, right? But I feel so compelled to share because so many of us don't have spaces that we can talk in, right? So many of us don't have places where we feel like we can share openly because let's be honest, when we start talking about losing babies, when we start talking about the death of children, that is an exceptionally hard topic. And I'll be honest, it's hard to even imagine putting on those shoes, right? Because those aren't shoes that anybody wants to wear, right? And so it's really hard to even fathom what that's like. And then so often, people are uncomfortable, right? It's hard. People don't know what to say and they want to be here for us. They want to be there for us. But so many times people don't know how to show up for us. And so, my purpose for being here and being on this journey and sharing you guys my perspective and life lessons that I learned on my own journey, right, is so that we can normalize having these conversations, right? Because the reality is sometimes we don't get to bring our babies home, right? The reality is that sometimes we have littles who battle illness and we don't get to watch them grow up, right? And then sometimes we do watch them grow up, but so many moms lose their children in their later years. And just based on conversations that I've had with other people who have adult children that they've lost, that pain is the same. And most people don't have a space where they can freely talk, right? And so that's why we're here, and that's what we're doing on the Revolve podcast. This is a safe space for us to have these conversations, right? And so today's conversation is what it looks like to have faith after the funeral is over, right? Because for so many of us, we are fighting just to make it to the funeral, right? We're struggling just holding it together with duct tape and crazy glue, right? We're just barely holding it together. And so this episode is for the woman who still believes but doesn't know how to pray anymore. For the mama who buried her baby and is wondering if she left a part of herself at the graveyard with her baby, right? For that person who's showing up at church every Sunday, but they're spiritually numb. For the woman who loves God with all her heart, but she feels like he's abandoned her. And she needs permission to wrestle with that feeling and to rebuild her faith, right? This is who the episode is for, that woman who's struggling with her faith. Because let's be honest, there's usually people around until the funeral, right? There's someone there, whether they're showing up with casseroles, they're calling to see how you're doing. But at some point, the calls slow down. People aren't stopping by to visit anymore. And so all of those distractions that you once had, you don't have them anymore. And the fact of the matter is, the world moved on and yours has stopped, right? And you're feeling numb, and everything you thought you believed, you're beginning to question it, right? I know for myself, I remember being at the funeral and thinking, like, where do I go from here? How do I move forward? There were times when I wanted to pray, but I didn't have the words for it. All I had was tears, right? There were many days when I sat in silence, and the only thing I could say was Jesus. There were literally days when that was the only thing I said. His name was my prayer. I didn't have a song to sing, because sometimes we can worship our way through certain situations, right? Sometimes we can pray our way through certain situations, but I'm going to be honest with you. When my son died, I didn't have it in me to pretend. And let's be honest, when we're having those moments, we think, is God still good when my life is so bad? Is he still good in those moments? And yes, I've had faith up until this point, but is my faith even real when I feel so empty? Does it even matter anymore? And here is what I learned: God is not afraid of our questions. He's not offended when we sit in silence with him, when we say, I don't have anything to say right now, because the fact of the matter is, God, I'm mad. Why did it have to be my baby? Right? He doesn't even flinch when we share that with him. Right? Because the thing is, he knows. But do you know that God can handle your doubt? He can handle those feelings of frustration, that sadness, that anger. We're not the first ones to ever feel that way. There are multiple people in the Bible who had an ought with him, right? Who felt the way about the things they were going through. In the book of Job, it says that he cursed the day he was born. Jeremiah declared that the Lord had deceived him. And even David, a man after God's own heart, said, how long, Lord? How long do I have to go through what I'm going through? How long do I have to suffer? Will you forget me forever? And let's not forget, Jesus cried out on the cross. And he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? So you are not alone in this feeling that you may have. We have company. And the God of Job, Jeremiah, and David, he's our God. He's still here today. And here's the thing, you having those feelings doesn't mean that you don't have faith anymore. Right? You having those feelings and you actually being able to voice that to him, if you let me tell it, that's an act of courage. Right? It's an act of courage. Because here's the facts. Faith ain't always pretty and polished after the funeral. It's just not. Right? Sometimes faith looks like just showing up raw, naked, vulnerable, with a snotty nose and a face full of tears, with a mind filled with questions, right? With no words to say, and trusting that God is there even when I'm not fully there. Even in those moments of doubt, he was faithful. Even when I had seasons of doubt, he sent help, right? And just like any other relationship, when trust is fractured, because let's be honest, right? And maybe it was just me, but I did have struggles with trusting God after everything I went through on my motherhood journey. I did. And especially with Judah, because I had had help with the others, he was a happy accident, right? He was a blessing. He was my surprise. He was my praise. And I said to myself, God, why would you allow me this experience? Why would you give him to me? Just for me to have to turn around and give him back. Why? Right? And I'm going to be honest with you. Even in rebuilding trust, I had to start with the question. I said, God, why? And I believe that he honors the question, right? It started with me saying, God, I'm here. Where are you? Are you here with me? Because there were some days I know that he was there because I'm still here today. Because after Judah, there were days when I felt like I was literally unraveling. If I didn't have to take care of Karis, because taking care of her was my anchor in that season, like I had to get myself together because my baby needed me, right? But by the grace of God, I honestly don't know because I wasn't in a healthy place mentally and emotionally for a long time. So I know God was there because I'm here and of sound mind most days, depending on who you ask, right? But I had to start there. And then I had to revisit scriptures, right? I had to remind myself of his promises. I held scriptures like God is close to the brokenhearted. He will never leave me nor forsake me. I can safely rest in his shadow. I took those scriptures to heart, right? You have to find the word of God and apply it to your situation, apply it to where you are emotionally and mentally, right? Don't be afraid to call on your community when you need it. Allow them to carry you when you can't carry yourself. In a previous episode, I shared how one of the church mothers came to check on me. And that's what community looks like. Allow those people who want to be there for you, allow them to do so, right? And learn to celebrate the little things, right? Because sometimes even the fact that you smiled today is a reason to smile. Because after my son died, I didn't know if I would smile again, right? I cried for weeks. Even looking forward to the sunset, spending time with your little one, right? Taking joy in the things that remind you that you are still here, right? Remembering his character, right? And like I always say, it's a process. Grief isn't something that just comes and goes. Like, you go through steps 1 through 6, and then once you get through all the steps, it's done, it's over. La, 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 la. That's just not how it works, right? We cycle in and out of the different phases of grief. And this is something that goes on for years. My son's 11th birthday just passed, right? His 11th heavenly birthday. And that morning, I woke up with him on my mind. And I took a nice long walk, but there were so many what ifs. What if he were still here? What would he look like? Would he be a football player? Or would he prefer basketball? Would he be a gamer? Who would he be? And that's okay. Because the reality is, I don't believe grief ever fully goes away. We get better with carrying it. Most days it's just a little, like a little butterfly that flies, that flutters by, just enough for you to see it out the corner of your eye or to feel it barely land on you. And then other days it feels like an elephant sitting in your chest. It just depends on what day it is. And that's okay, right? And it's okay to wonder, right? It's okay to talk to God about these things. And with all the questions I still have, the reality is I had those questions, but I didn't really need the answers. I needed God's presence. I needed to know that He was still here and that He was still with me, that He had not forgotten about me, right? And as you go through this process, that numbness starts to ease up, right? You start to be able to feel again. And it's not because the grief left, but His grace became sufficient, right? Rebuilding our trust in Him isn't always a big giant leap. Sometimes it's that little whisper when we're able to tell Him, God, I trust you. Even in this, I trust you. It's that slow crawl back to Him, to the one who actually never left, right? He was always right there, waiting on us to come back to Him, right? And your faith doesn't have to be loud. A lot of times we think of faith as being this thing that we shout from the rooftops, like, I believe God, I trust God. And we do, especially in these types of situations, right? especially if you are a family who struggled with infertility and then you finally get pregnant and then the pregnancy doesn't go to term and then you still have to your faith. Where is that faith that we believe, right? And that's okay. Because the Bible tells us in Psalms 34 and 18 that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. It didn't say you had to be strong. It didn't say you have to be healed. It said that he is close to the brokenhearted, right? In Romans 8 and 26, it says that the Spirit intercedes with groans too deep for words. It's not jumping up and down shouting hallelujah, right? It's that little prayer that you breathe, God help me, right? It's not the dance, it's just the fact that I'm still standing. It's not because I'm so certain about what tomorrow looks like, but that I'm surrendering it to Him, right? Because we don't have to climb out of grief because God is right there in the middle of it with us. He is already there, right? He's at the cemetery, He's in the ache, He's in the aftermath, that emotional turmoil. And when everyone else has moved on, He is still right there. He's still right there. And so, if this is you grieving today, if you're doubting, if you're numb, I want you to know that you are still being held by the Father. Your faith isn't gone, but it may be quiet right now. And quiet faith is still faith. And my prayer for you today is that you will know and feel God's nearness, that you will allow yourself to grieve, and that you will rebuild your trust in Him. And it doesn't have to be all at once, but one breath at a time. And that you will know the funeral was not the end. Sometimes the funeral is the beginning of a deeper, quieter, more intimate, and honest walk with the Father. I am praying for you. And so until next time, keep choosing healing, keep choosing joy. I love y'all.